What if your child is not lazy, defiant, or broken? What if their ADHD brain is simply tired, overwhelmed, stressed, or unsupported in a system that was never designed for the way that they learn? In today's conversation, I'm joined by Dr. Amy Moore, a cognitive psychologist, child development specialist, ADHD mom, and director of psychology and research at LearningRx. We talk about what parents need to know when their child has ADHD, why 504 and IEPs are not always enough, what big emotions are really telling us, and how homeschooling can give families the freedom to meet their child where they actually are. If you feel like your child is struggling in school, melting down at home, or constantly being made to feel like they are the problem, this episode will give you language, hope, and practical tools to help you see your child differently. Hello, my name is Janae Daniels. I'm a wife, a mother of 6, and a former middle school teacher turned homeschool mom, independent researcher, and homeschooling mentor. Welcome to the School to Homeschool podcast. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I am very excited for today's guest. This is Dr. Amy Moore. Dr. Amy has a PhD in psychology and a master's degree in early childhood education and has worked with neurodivergent kids and their families for over 30 years. She is a classic overachiever as she is the host of the Brainy Moms podcast. She's a TEDx speaker, a Christian counselor, and a writer. And on top of it all, Dr. Amy is an ADHD mom and a mom with ADHD. She and her husband, Jeff, have been together for 3 decades, and they have three grown sons. And she has a book that's just about to be released called Hearts on ADHD Parenting, Brain-Based Grace-Filled Strategies for Raising Kids with Big Emotions and Challenging Behaviors. So, Dr. Amy, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me today.
Let's talk a little bit about your background, because you first went into childhood development and then later into psychology.
Yeah. So, as I was graduating from undergrad, majoring in psychology, I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go to grad school yet. And so I took a job teaching preschool that summer and fell in love with the kids and decided that maybe I wanted to be an educator rather than a psychologist. And so I went and got a master's degree in early childhood education, got my teacher's license, and ended up doing curriculum development and teacher training for military child development and youth programs for about a decade.
Wow.
And so I did spend some time in the classroom myself, but mostly I've been a teacher of teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And what I noticed over that decade was that we were missing something. In the classroom. We had kids who were struggling regardless of the instructional strategies, regardless of the curriculum that was being implemented and constantly changed. And so I decided, you know what, I should have been a psychologist like I had originally planned, so that I can do some research and figure out what's happening in the brain. And so that's what I did. I went back, got my PhD, and that's where I am now, just looking at the brain-based issues that cause struggles with thinking and learning and behavior.
Yeah. Wow. And then what made you decide to really hone in on it? Because you cover a lot of topics and a lot of things with neurodivergent, neurodevelopmental kids. What made you decide to focus on ADHD?
So I was diagnosed with ADHD after failing out of college twice.
Wow.
And my mom was a child development specialist. And she kept saying when I was 16, 17, 18, I think you have ADHD. And at the time, it was really just being diagnosed in hyperactive boys. And so it didn't make much sense to me. And but after failing college the second time, I finally said to my mom, sure, I'll go get tested. And so my results were off the charts.
You were the poster child.
Oh, well, that's why I'm struggling so much. And so, once I got that diagnosis and, got some treatment, then sailed through college and grad school. And then I was drawn to the children with ADHD. I think because I understood what it felt like.
Yeah.
I understood what it felt like to get bullied and teased, and how teachers didn't relate well to me as a student with ADHD. And so I was drawn to those kids, and then became a parent, and 2 of my 3 boys have ADHD. And it just made sense that I live it, I breathe it all day, every day, my own brain, my kids' brains, and the kids that I work with. And so that's why I chose to specialize in it.
Gotcha. Now, so let's talk about your kids for a second, because you have 3 boys.
Mhm.
And they're all adults now. Um, what did you do for their schooling growing up?
Yeah. So we did a little bit of everything. We've Our middle child, who does not have ADHD, went straight through public school with no issues. It worked for him. And so my oldest really started struggling in middle school.
Okay.
Had an IEP and a 504 plan throughout elementary school and did fine, but the middle school really failed him. And we found ourselves in the principal's office the last day of school in 7th grade, having gotten an email the night before from one of his teachers saying he has 20 missing assignments. He's going to fail this class if he doesn't turn them in by midnight. And part of his 504 plan was that the teachers communicated with us if he had missing assignments. And so you can't possibly think a child with ADHD can get 20 assignments done in one evening.
Right.
No, I mean, a child without ADHD cannot get 20 assignments done in one evening.
Right.
And so we found ourselves standing there saying, you were not implementing my child's 504 plan. We need to meet. Ended up having an emergency, IEP meeting, and at the end said, you have failed our child and we're pulling him out. So we disenroll our child, we get to the car, we look at each other and say, now what? Right. Which I think is a really common conversation that parents have when they make that transition to homeschooling, right? They're like, this isn't working. So what will work?
Right.
And so we ended up doing an online schooling kind of program for him for the rest of middle school. And then he said, I want to go back to school for high school. So he did. And then our youngest was a COVID child. And so our story was sort of similar to yours, right? Like it was not working during COVID. And we said, your mental health is more important to us than your academics. And so we disenrolled him and then did a combination of unschooling, homeschooling, and dual enrollment at the local college for him, right? Like,
so how old was he when you pulled him?
He was a sophomore.
Okay.
In high school. But he had already been dually enrolled starting as a freshman in college. So that environment was okay. But he was a competitive rock climber. He was very involved in youth ministry at church. And so we lean into that, what are those areas of passion and competence that each child has that we can lean into and build up and support so that it builds resilience to the rest of the struggles. And so we gave him credit for rock climbing. We gave him credit for running the coffee bar at church. We gave him credit for the youth ministry volunteer work that he did, right? So that's how unschooling works. And in Colorado, we are fortunate enough to be able to have the freedom to find those things that we can plug into that, transcript for. And then, the rest we either did at home or we sent him to college and gave him high school credit for it.
I love that. I want to go back for just a second and talk about the 504 in the public school system, because I found the same with my son. I have one child who is also a poster child for ADHD, and oftentimes I found that his 504 and the accommodations were not being met, which I think is pretty typical. But what what did you find as a psychologist? Do you see this very often where the 504s are not being met in the schools?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, one, we have to look at what our expectations are of teachers who have, especially in middle school and high school, who have several hundred students.
Yeah.
And so for them to be able to keep track of every accommodation for every student who has a 504 plan, to keep track of every service that every student with an IEP has, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I can remember walking into my classroom as a second grade teacher, knowing I had students on 504 plans and IEPs, but not having seen those yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
There was some holdup, or the file was missing, or there was always a challenge happening. And so absolutely, I see that. But the other issue that I see is that we accommodate things that should be remediated instead. And so, just putting a child with ADHD in the front row isn't changing the ADHD brain. And so that can be super frustrating for the child, for the parent, and for the teacher.
So what are some of the most common things, okay, within public school, but then also with homeschooling, because I do want to get to that we can do for those kids to accommodate for the ADHD brain?
Yeah. So the first question I always ask when I'm talking to parents and they say, either, do you think my child has ADHD, or my child has ADHD, but I don't know what to do? The first question I always ask is your child tired, hungry, sick, or stressed? Because all four of those influence ADHD symptoms. Do they cause ADHD? No, but they influence how ADHD shows up. And so if our child is not getting restorative sleep, sleep is like a car wash for the brain. So as we go throughout our day, we use up neurotransmitters, those chemicals that help our neurons communicate, and they actually leave behind toxins. And so if you think of it as a city where people are walking around all day and they're throwing trash on the ground, and then at night the street sweeper comes in and cleans up the trash, that's what sleep actually does for our brain. When we fall asleep, we have something called the glymphatic system with a G. It actually releases cerebrospinal fluid that washes the brain. Wow. It's really amazing.
Wow.
And so it cleanses those toxins that have built up during the day. And then we wake up the next day and our neurons can communicate. But if we're not getting restorative sleep, then our neurons have a difficult time communicating through all of that trash that didn't get cleaned up at night. So the ADHD brain has a problem with neuronal communication anyway, right? Like, so we struggle with dopamine and norepinephrine and even some serotonin. So we want to do everything we can to help the brain work a little bit better. And so helping our child get restorative sleep is the first step. So tired, hungry, sick, or stressed. The second thing I like to focus on is nutrition. Is our child eating sugar? Sugar is inflammatory. It causes inflammation in the body. And if the body is inflamed, so is the brain. If the brain is inflamed, our neurons can't communicate as effectively. Yeah. Are we letting our kids eat things with artificial food coloring? So most research studies since 1990 show a connection between artificial food dyes and ADHD symptoms.
Wow.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, because like if you, and I don't know if you can answer this, but in Europe, there's a lot more regulation on artificial food dye. Are there less people diagnosed with ADHD in Europe than there are in the United States? I mean, is that something that's even
I actually don't know the answer to that question, but now I want to go look it up because
it makes me wonder, like,
right. So those research studies are not randomized controlled trials, right? Like that would not be ethical for us to randomize kids to one group where we give them all of this artificial food dye crap,
Right.
and then the other people we give really nutritious food to. That would not be ethical. So these are just, correlational studies.
Okay.
But when you see study after study after study with thousands and thousands of kids and adults, something is happening there. Right. And so something is happening, and it's enough to say, maybe I should not let my kids eat things with artificial food coloring, right? Things like that.
Right.
And the same thing with pesticides. We've seen a lot of research where kids with ADHD in the studies where they've looked at it have more pesticides in their urine than kids without ADHD. Right. Wow. So something is happening, again, not randomized controlled trials, but a pattern, and a pattern that makes us say, well, maybe we should eat organic foods when we can. Anything that we can do, right, to look carefully about what we're putting in and on our bodies, that might lower the temperature on some of those big emotions and challenging behaviors that we see in ADHD. So, all right. So tired, hungry, sick, or stressed. Right. So we've talked about sleep. We've talked about nutrition. Obviously, if we're sick, our brains don't work as well. I mean, that one but it's enough to say, hey, I'm seeing this behavior today because my child isn't feeling well. And so maybe we don't do school today, right? Because it's an uphill battle, right? We're swimming against the tide. And then stress is the big one. When we are experiencing stress, our brains respond the same way to chronic stress as they do to trauma. Wow. So that fight or flight response happens in the presence of chronic stress. ADHD is a stressor. So I can automatically tell you your child is experiencing chronic stress because they have ADHD. So what are we going to do about that stress? But there are other sources of stress too. So are we meeting our child's sensory processing issues, right? Because so many kids with ADHD are either sensory seekers or sensory avoiders. And so
Interesting.
Are our lights too bright? Is there too much sound happening? Do we have a child who runs around and throws themselves into the couch cushions? That's a sensory seeker. That child needs more movement, more proprioceptive input from the environment. So we have to look closely at, are we meeting their sensory needs? Have we taught our kids some emotion regulation exercises, right? Some cool down strategies, breathing, grounding, quick exit strategies when they are feeling stressed. Because if they don't know what to do with those big emotions, it just continues the fight or flight cycle. So
what are some good examples of emotional recognition exercises that a parent can do with their child or have their child do?
The simplest one is a physiological sigh. So I just call it the sigh. And I like to do this with kids. And so I'll say something like, hey, I notice that you're really struggling right now. Can I help? How about if we just sigh together? Ready? And so you're going to take a deep breath in, and then another quick breath in, and then a long exhale.
Okay.
And the secret there is in the exhale, right? We're always talking about, take a deep breath. Well, the exhale needs to be longer than the inhale in order to press the brakes on the sympathetic nervous system response, on that fight or flight response. And so that sigh is just quick and easy to do. Another one is to activate the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is the longest nerve branch in the body. And when we can activate that, again, that will press the brakes on the sympathetic nervous system response. And so the easiest one to do is humming, singing, or what I like to call cool breathing. So you're going to inhale in, and as you exhale, you're going to say the word cool until you're all out of air. So I can do it with you. Ready?
Yes, let's try it. Cool.
And so you can feel the vibration, right, of your voice box. Again, that presses the brakes on that fight or flight. I have this really great memory of being dysregulated, emotionally dysregulated myself. Remember, I have an ADHD brain, and emotion dysregulation is super common in an ADHD brain. And I was just, spouting off at the mouth about whatever it is that I was upset about. And my youngest child walked by me and went, "Mom, cool."
In the mouths of babes.
I'm like, okay. But I love that, right? Because I had taught him some emotion regulation techniques, and he was able to help me in that minute, right? And it was not a parenting moment, right? I was upset about something unrelated to a family issue, but he just walked by and prompted me. And so we can do that too. With our kids, but easy ways to ground our kids. Hey, I'm noticing right now that you're struggling. And that is the word that I use, right? I don't say upset. I usually say, I'm noticing that you're struggling. Can I help? Look around and name 5 things that you can see. How about 4 things that you can feel or touch? 3 things that you can hear right now. 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And so what that does is it uses our senses to bring us into the present rather than what's happening in this spinning, anxiety, fear-producing moment that has created this fight or flight or the stress. There's nothing magical about those ones that I just taught. A lot of them you can Google. Breathing exercises for kids, grounding exercises for kids. I have a whole section in my book of really cool ones. And then quick exit strategies, right? Like we teach our kids when they're dysregulated, maybe they just need to change their environment, right? Like, let's just walk down the hall for a second, right? Remove ourselves from the current environment. And what it does is it gives a totally different set of sensory inputs.
Interesting.
Right, that we can then focus on.
I love that. What part does exercise play for ADHD kids?
Yep, a large part. So all kids need exercise. All adults need exercise. But what it does for the ADHD brain, what we know from research is that aerobic exercise helps the brain release BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. And that is like miracle grow for the brain. So it helps the neurons communicate. It helps the neurons grow. And so that is really, really helpful for an ADHD brain. And so we know that aerobic activity produces BDNF. And so that's why it's so beneficial to all brains, but specifically an ADHD child will benefit from that.
I love that.
But it doesn't have to be running, right? So I love when we get ADHD kids involved in martial arts, in dance, in rock climbing, in things that really also include visual processing, spatial awareness, balance. Anytime that we can engage those other cognitive skills, that uses more areas of the brain at once. And that's really healthy for ADHD kids too.
I love that. So one of the things that I found, and I hear this a lot of times from parents thinking about leaving the school system, they're like, well, my child has a 504 and they've got ADHD, and how will that work at home? Will they receive accommodations at home? I'm like, well, you're the teacher. So there's that, but one of the things that I found with my own son and my son's an adult now, but when he was little, and he had been diagnosed with ADHD, he had this godsend of a teacher who recognized like his need for exercise, his need for space. And so she and the PE teacher got together, and the PE teacher would pull him out of class and throw the football with him a couple times a week extra because he was so like just jittery, and they had so few recesses. And she was like, this is a problem. And this is my one child in the class that will cause the most problems if he doesn't get more exercise. And so I still think about how grateful I am that they did that for him. but that didn't continue as he got older, nor could it have, because again, the teachers are overworked and underpaid, and they've got lots of students. And I found that he never homeschooled, but talking about families that do homeschool, what can they do? How do I say this? It's in my head. The ones that have struggled in the public school system with lack of recess, not enough sleep, all of those things, bringing them home, what are things that you've noticed have helped those families, or has it helped
Yeah,
those families? Does that make sense?
absolutely. Oh,
Clear
absolutely.
as mud. I'm being clear as mud.
Right. So the beauty of homeschooling is the flexibility and the freedom that we have to meet our child's needs. We can meet them right where they are. And so we have to first start with this mindset that we're not trying to recreate the public school classroom at our dining room table. That's not the point of homeschooling, right? That's just changing the environment. That isn't changing all of the other things that we can do to help our ADHD child or our child with learning struggles. And so, one of the first things that we can do is say, okay, how old is my child and what is their circadian rhythm like? And if this is a late middle school or high schooler, then why are we starting school at 7 a.m.?
Yeah.
A high schooler's brain does not work best at 7 a.m., right? That child needs to start school at 9 or 9:30 a.m., not 7. And that's okay. That's really cool that we have the flexibility and freedom as homeschooling parents to do that. And so that really supports that older child's need for restorative sleep when we can shift what the school day hours look like. The other thing is, because we're not recreating the school day, we probably aren't homeschooling for 8 or 9 hours.
Yeah.
That's not required by law. So why are we doing that when we can homeschool for 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever the state law says in the state where you are? And there's nothing that says that we have to do subjects back to back to back, right? So we work with our child. We say, hey, these are the requirements. This is what we have to get done. Let's talk about what you would like to do first. What would you like to do after lunch? What would you like to do after our bike ride? And then having visual supports for that daily schedule that your child helped create is really important for ADHD kids, because ADHD kids and adults struggle with time management. And they struggle with being able to determine how long it will take to do something. So what we have to do when we first start homeschooling is establish those patterns, right? Be really flexible. Like, how long does it take us to get through math? How long does it take us to get through language arts? Then we take that information, that's data, right, that we're collecting. We take that information and create our schedule. Otherwise, we feel like we're behind. We feel like, oh my gosh, we didn't get to cover this yet today. Well, okay, the beauty of homeschooling is we have the flexibility to say, well, it takes my child an average of this long to do math. And so that's how our schedule is going to work. But we can build in breaks. We can build in movement breaks. We can build in nutrition breaks that our kids help create and choose from. Like, I love to use a menu of choices. Hey, how would you like to spend this break?
So have you found it's been helpful for families with kids with ADHD to jump into homeschooling? Has it been beneficial for the child emotionally as well as academically?
Absolutely, because most kids with ADHD are either expressing their big emotions and challenging behaviors at school, which is then creating situations where they may be bullied by classmates. Their teachers are frustrated. And when a teacher is frustrated with a child, you know this, right? Yeah. We don't always interact with them as positively as we should. When you are constantly being told you're doing something wrong, you're breaking this rule, you're failing this class, then you have this sense of failure
Mhm.
that when we bring this home, right? Well, first of all, we have to de-school for a little while, right?
Yeah.
So that our
Yeah.
child can decompress from some of that chronic stress they were feeling in the classroom.
Mhm.
And then give them some Goldilocks type tasks so that they can experience success and know what that feels like to be
So
successful.
so clarify Goldilocks
Yeah. So
tasks.
not too easy and not too hard, but
Just
just
right.
right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Tasks that are exactly at their skill level. And then once they experience some success doing tasks that are exactly where they are, then we can stretch them. Then we can give them something a little bit more challenging, and we scaffold that, right? Like we provide those external supports to help them grow and experience some mastery. But yes, so that's one scenario, right? Where this ADHD child is at school and failing and being bullied and struggling. The other scenario is you've got an ADHD child who's an expert at masking. And masking is where they are using all of their cognitive capacity to hide their struggle. So they're quiet. They never get in trouble. They're silently failing, right? But it doesn't show up for several months. They're silently failing because they don't have any cognitive capacity left for the actual schoolwork because they're so busy masking their ADHD struggles. And that is a child that you typically will see that after school letdown. They get in the car or they walk in the door and they fall apart. And so that's the child where you have a parent teacher conference and the teacher says, "Oh, they're perfect angels at school," right? And you've got them melting face down into the carpet, screaming, crying, a total meltdown at home because they feel safe with you. They've masked all day. Now they're exhausted and they feel safe with you. So they're falling apart. Anyway, so you remove the school struggle, right? So either the big behaviors at school or the masking at school. And absolutely that's going to change their emotional health.
Wow. And I imagine some amount of healing happens. I know for my son, one of the things that he and I have talked about an extent is that he said, I really thought that I was stupid. Like and not that my husband and I said that he was stupid because we're like, no, you're a super smart kid. But that constant struggle with executive functioning and things like that. And then he'd get bad grades. And um, do you find that often these kids develop self-worth issues as a result of all of the pressure that they're feeling at school and trying to deal with their ADHD? Is that to be fair?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when somehow they've gotten the message that achievement is tied to their self-worth.
Hmm.
And so we can inadvertently send that message to them. You read in my bio that I'm a classic overachiever. Well, I inadvertently sent that message to my youngest child that was my expectation for him because I am this striver and I am this overachiever. He automatically assumed that was our expectation for him. And so that created mental health issues where he had to go to counseling and unpack all of that to understand, okay, where did that message come from? So we have to be intentional in our interactions and what we say and the words that we use and the goals that we set so that our kids don't get an unwritten rule or an unwritten expectation from our own behaviors. But yes, so whether that is the message that they're hearing at school, right? That, oh, I'm getting awards because I'm getting all A's, therefore that makes me worth more than the child who gets pulled out for all of their extra services. Kids know that, right?
Yeah.
You can label reading groups blue, red, and green, but kids know that the blue reading group is the low reading group.
Yeah, they're not. I remember that even in kindergarten, like knowing like, oh, I'm in the lowest reading group. And I remember thinking I'm not as smart because I'm in the lowest reading group, even though it was called the star reading group or whatever,
Right.
so, but it's true.
Sure.
Okay. I want to ask you about something, something a little controversial. Uh, let's talk about medication.
Okay.
At what point, um, should a parent look at medication for a child with ADHD?
Yeah. So I actually love this question. Um, I'm not anti-medication at all. So I just want to say that up front. But what I will say is that medication, all medications, ADHD, heart medications, whatever, have side effects. And so we have to take that into account when we are considering putting our child or ourselves on medication.
Mhm.
And so the question I would like parents to consider is, have I tried all of these other things yet? Have I asked that question? Is my child tired, hungry, sick, or stressed? Have I helped them get restorative sleep? Have I helped plus up their nutrition? Have I made sure they're getting enough exercise? Have I made sure to help relieve some of those stressors that they're experiencing? All of this is impacting brain health. And if I've done all of that and it still hasn't moved the needle as far as we need it to move, and I would also say, and this is my research focus, have I looked at remediating those cognitive skills that we've seen are weak? I did this amazing study with neuroscientist Dr. Christina Ledbetter, where we looked at the cognitive profiles of more than 5,000 kids and adults with ADHD. And we plotted them on a graph to see, is there a pattern of cognitive skills that are low, high? What do those cognitive profiles look like? And what we found was attention was not the most deficient cognitive skill. Working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed were lower from ages 4 through 40. So across childhood and into adulthood, working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed were more deficient than attention. And so if we're choosing interventions that are only targeting attention, then we're missing what's really happening in the ADHD brain. So have we done everything that we can do to remediate weak working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed? And that would include like having those skills evaluated, right? And normally they would be evaluated in a neuropsych test report, right? Like when our child got that ADHD diagnosis. So read that report, look at that. So if they got a full cognitive testing report, you would be able to see the results from each of those individual cognitive skills. And if working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed are indeed low, then do something about that first too. So there are all of these things, and cognitive training would be my recommendation. But there are all these
training. Okay.
Yes. That's what we do at LearningRx.
Okay.
So looking at all of these influences on big emotions and challenging behaviors, if we still haven't moved the needle enough, then that's when I personally would consider medication. So I just want to say this, it's my disclaimer. I'm a PhD, not an MD. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a psychologist. So I can't make a recommendation on specific medications or when to get it. But that is how I coach parents. Do all of this other stuff that we can possibly do as parents first, and then consider medication, simply because we want to avoid side effects. Here's the analogy that I use. You can kill a fly on a wall with a fly swatter or a wrecking ball. Both kill the fly, but which one does less damage to the wall?
Oh, I love that. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So if a parent suspects that their child may have ADHD, what would they do next? Where would they go for testing? Who would they talk to?
Yeah.
What do you do?
So a clinical psychologist or clinical child psychologist or clinical neuropsychologist are the three experts in ADHD. Most parents will start with their pediatrician. And I think that's great. But I don't recommend stopping there.
Okay.
So unless it's a developmental pediatrician or a behavioral pediatrician who does comprehensive testing, just running that checklist in the pediatrician's office, because I see this all the time. For a child who is in school, the teacher will suggest to the parent, I think your child has ADHD. This is what I'm seeing. By the way, teachers are not qualified to make that suggestion. Just want to say that. You and I have both been teachers. We know that we were not qualified to make that suggestion.
Absolutely not qualified, right?
Okay. And so then the parent goes to the pediatrician and says, hey, the teacher thinks my child has ADHD. I see this at home too. The pediatrician runs a checklist and said, yeah, it looks like it could be ADHD. Here's your Ritalin or your Adderall or your Concerta. So I think that the pediatrician is a great place to start. Hey, I'm concerned about some behaviors that I'm seeing at home. I'm concerned about some behaviors that my child's teacher is telling me. Can you make a referral or can you give me a recommendation on a child psychologist, child neuropsychologist, or clinical psychologist that we could see? That's the question to ask.
Okay.
I actually just did a podcast episode this week. It's out this week called Diagnosis 101. It's with Dr. Rebecca Fontanetta, who is a clinical child neuropsychologist, and we talk about this exact question. So she's super smart and has some really great advice. Diagnosis 101 on the Brainy Moms podcast.
Okay. And I'm going to link that for those of y'all watching so that you can get that link really quickly without having to look it up.
Yeah.
So what's one question that I have not asked you yet that you wish I would have asked you?
Wow. I've never been asked that question. So how about, what should a parent do if they also have ADHD?
Oh, yes. Yes.
So this is actually one of my new workshops at all the homeschool conferences that I'm speaking at this season, because people would come to me in the hallway of conferences and with that question. Okay, I have ADHD too. What do I do? And we know that about 70% of kids with ADHD have a parent with ADHD.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. There's a strong genetic component there too. So my first piece of advice is that we have to let go of shame and guilt of passing down ADHD to our child. So our child may have inherited ADHD from us, and we can't change genetics, but we can change our child's experience. And so it's really important for us to take that mindset, right? That there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do about our genes. And so we have to let that shame go. We have to show ourselves some grace. And then just say, okay, how can I change how my child experiences ADHD? So we have to show ourselves some grace, get rid of shame and guilt. And we have to surround ourselves with a support system, whether that's our own therapist, whether that's a friend who understands because they're also parenting someone with ADHD or they have it themselves. Now, my recommendation is not to have a whole group of friends with ADHD. Can you imagine? Like, who would make the decisions? Who would get anything done? Who would be in charge? Just find one. I have celiac disease, and I always say that I collect friends, gluten-free friends, but I do not collect ADHD friends, right?
You got the one. I've got one ADHD friend.
Right. Absolutely. And then I think it's really important that we show gratitude to our non-ADHD spouse. It is so hard for our non-ADHD spouse to live with us and our ADHD child. And so we have to thank them regularly for how they're supporting all of us. That goes a long way, right? Because that's thankless to be the non-ADHD spouse for sure. But then we also have to separate home responsibilities based on our strengths. And so if we're not organized and our non-ADHD spouse is, then let the non-ADHD spouse do those tasks that require organization. And then we choose ones that don't. And in my house, if you look at my side of the closet, it looks like fireworks went off on it. And so I am not the organized one. And so my husband is in charge of organization. He can't do finances unemotionally, but I can.
Gotcha.
So we've divided it that way. Anyway, so find things so that you reduce the chance for tension based on just those everyday responsibilities. But grace is the only way that we get through ADHD parenting and ADHD living. So
if they're homeschooling, if you're a homeschooling mom and you've got ADHD, what's the best course to go about that then? Like, would it be to create a schedule for yourself and your child? What would be to plan only certain days, or what would that look like?
Yeah. So everybody with adults with ADHD all have different struggles. By the time that our brains are fully developed, which now they are as adults, we've developed some coping skills and some strategies that work for us typically. And so everybody's strengths and weaknesses are going to look a little bit different. So I don't want to like prescribe something specific, except every piece of advice that I just gave for your child's ADHD brain applies to you. Gotcha. And so we have to take care of our own brains first. And when we're able to plus up sleep and nutrition and physical activity and lowering our stress and teaching ourselves some of those self-regulation and for Christian families, inviting the Holy Spirit into that place, right? Being willing to say, this is too big for me. I need a little bit of help, Lord. Is super powerful. But yes, visuals are critical so that everyone is on the same page. This is what our day is going to look like, but have some flexibility and a plan B in that too. I always talk about, if we have to drop back and punt because something failed, that's okay, right? That is the really cool thing about homeschooling, is we have that freedom and flexibility to fail, and it's okay. We're going to just try it a different way. And so we adopt that mindset of being problem solvers. ADHD is not a challenge that separates us. It's just a challenge that we fight together, right? Like it's this tornado out there that we say, okay, we're going to be problem solvers here. And that didn't work. What went wrong? What can we try next? And if we approach every failure like that, then we don't get frustrated. We don't get mad at each other. We're not screaming and yelling and melting into the carpet face down. We're saying, oh gosh, that one didn't work. Let's laugh about that and problem solve.
I love that. Okay, let's talk briefly about your book. It comes out in July, and it's all about helping ADHD kids. Is that correct? Can you talk about it just briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Hearts on ADHD Parenting. And I cover everything we talked about today, right? Like how do we work on those influences? It's really about how do we meet unmet needs? Okay. Because if we look under that ADHD iceberg, there's all this stuff happening, and it's usually an unmet need of some sort. And so my book just talks about how do we identify what needs aren't being met, and then what do we do to meet them? And then the entire last section is all about emotion regulation. So that we know that that's a huge issue for ADHD. And so I give dozens and dozens of activities for helping kids and parents work on emotion regulation so that we can be fully present in our interactions with our kids. And it works with any parenting style, right? So I don't go, okay, this is the parenting style you need to adopt, right? It's whatever parenting style you have is fine as long as you're meeting unmet needs.
Oh, I love that. Okay, if people want to find you, where's the best? Where can everyone find you and reach you?
Yeah. So my website is amymorephd.com. My podcast is The Brainy Moms. And so that's thebrainymoms.com. And we're on social media at The Brainy Moms. And if you want to learn more about cognitive training and getting cognitive skills tested, you can go to learningrx.com/homeschool. There's special offers just for homeschooling families. You can sign up for a monthly newsletter that's got really cool free resources just on how to support the ADHD brain, how to support homeschool kids in general. So learningrx.com/homeschool.
Fantastic. And I'm going to have all of those in the show notes as well. So y'all can all find them. So Dr.
Awesome.
Amy, thank you so much for taking the time today to come and share your expertise and your wisdom with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Grandmas and grandpas, mamas and papas, you are doing so much better than you think you are. You got this, and we will talk next week.